Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking you through one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries, really, in American history, the murder of JonBenét Ramsey. This case has captivated the public for over 25 years. And for good reason. I mean, you have a seemingly perfect family, a horrific crime, and just a trail of evidence that seems to lead in circles. We're going to try to make sense of it all. We're going to be using court documents, investigative reports, and media coverage from the time.
Yeah, it's a case that truly has it all, wealth, beauty pageants, this bizarre ransom note, and a crime scene just riddled with clues that seem to point in every direction but a definitive answer.
Let's start with JonBenét herself.
Yeah.
Before that tragic Christmas in 1996, her life seemed almost storybook, right? A beautiful home, involved in beauty pageants, seemingly adored by her family. But as we know, this story takes a very dark turn.
That contrast between the idyllic image and the brutality of her death, I think, is a big part of why this case continues to fascinate people. It's almost impossible to reconcile those two realities.
It really is. And then on Christmas Day, 1996, everything changed. The family celebrated the holiday, and by all accounts, it was a normal, happy occasion. But the next morning, December 26th, JonBenét is reported missing. Patsy, her mother, calls 911 and says she found a ransom note demanding $118,000. Doesn't that strike you as oddly specific?
Extremely specific. And that amount, being so close to John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus, is one of the first things that raised red flags for investigators. The note also instructed the family not to involve the police, but of course they did anyway.
Then just hours later, JonBenét's body is found in the basement of their own home. It's a chilling discovery. That instantly shifted the focus of the investigation from a missing child case to a homicide.
Absolutely. And with the discovery of the body, the investigation takes a much darker turn. The list of potential suspects starts to grow, and each one seems to lead to more questions than answers.
The first person to come under scrutiny is Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother. Investigators use handwriting analysis to compare the ransom note to Patsy's writing, and some experts believe they saw similarities. Plus, there's that unsettling detail about the ransom amount mirroring John's bonus. Could that really just be a coincidence?
It's certainly a point that needs to be considered. But even putting that aside, consider the psychology of this scenario. A mother potentially harming her own child. It's something that most people find incredibly difficult to comprehend.
You're right, it's a notion that challenges our most basic assumptions about a parent's love and protective instincts. But are there other cases, historically, where we've seen these instincts subverted? Cases that might offer some kind of explanation?
Unfortunately, there are. History is full of tragic cases where the unthinkable has happened within a family. And that's why investigators can't rule anyone out, no matter how difficult it is to imagine.
Then we have Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's brother, who was only 9 years old at the time. There's been much speculation about his potential involvement, fueled by things like his fingerprints being found on a bowl of pineapple, which JonBenét had also eaten.
Investigating a child in a case like this is extraordinarily complex. Children, especially at that age, can be easily influenced or frightened. Their memories can be unreliable, and their actions might not always be intentional in the way an adult would be.
So how do investigators even approach a situation like that? Trying to uncover the truth without causing further trauma to a child who may have already experienced something horrific.
It requires a very delicate touch. You need specialists trained in child psychology, and you have to be incredibly cautious about the way you ask questions. The goal is to gather information without leading the child or creating false memories.
It's a tightrope walk for sure. And then, years later, a new figure enters the picture, John Mark Carr, an elementary school teacher with a disturbing past. He confessed to accidentally killing JonBenét during a sexual assault. What made his confession so compelling at the time?
Carr's confession was incredibly detailed, and he seemed to have an intimate knowledge of the crime scene, including details that hadn't been released to the public. He even claimed to have drugged JonBenét, which initially seemed to line up with some of the forensic evidence.
But then, almost as quickly as he appeared, his story unraveled.
That's right. DNA testing quickly proved that Carr's DNA didn't match any of the evidence found at the crime scene. This development completely debunked his confession, highlighting the very real phenomenon of false confessions.
So what leads someone to falsely confess to such a heinous crime? What's going on in their minds?
There are many reasons. Sometimes it's a desire for notoriety, a warped sense of wanting to be part of something infamous. Others might be suffering from mental health issues that lead them to believe they're responsible, even if they have no actual memory of the event. And in some cases, unfortunately, false confessions can be coerced during interrogations.
So even a confession, seemingly the most damning piece of evidence. It needs to be scrutinized, analyzed, and corroborated. Nothing can be taken at face value, especially in a case this complicated.
Exactly. And that brings us to the physical evidence, those tangible clues that could hold the key to solving this mystery.
Let's start with the boot print. Investigators discovered an unidentified boot print near JonBenét's body. What can a footprint tell us in a case like this?
A footprint can potentially reveal a lot of information, the type of shoe, the brand, even the approximate size of the person who wore it. In this case, the boot print didn't match any footwear belonging to the Ramsey family, which immediately raised suspicions that someone else was in the house that night.
And then there's the broken basement window. Was it a sign of forced entry, or was it staged to mislead investigators?
That's one of the big questions that continue to plague this case. Some experts believe the window could have been broken from the inside, suggesting that the scene was staged to make it look like an intruder broke in, but others argue that there's evidence to support a genuine forced entry.
So we're left with a piece of evidence that could be interpreted in multiple ways, adding another layer of complexity to an already convoluted investigation.
Precisely. And then, of course, we have the DNA evidence, perhaps the most crucial piece of the puzzle in many criminal investigations.
Traces of an unknown male's DNA were found on JonBenét's clothing, but the technology at the time was limited. What were investigators able to do with that DNA evidence in 1996?
In 1996, DNA technology was nowhere near as advanced as it is today. Investigators could determine that the DNA didn't belong to anyone in the Ramsey family, but they couldn't definitively match it to anyone in their existing databases.
So even with this potentially crucial piece of evidence, investigators hit a wall.
They did, and that brings us to the grand jury, a group of citizens tasked with examining the evidence and determining whether there was enough to formally charge someone with a crime. In this case, the grand jury focused their attention on the Ramsey family.
Right, and these proceedings were shrouded in secrecy, which only added to the public speculation. What was the outcome of the grand jury's investigation?
After reviewing all the evidence, the grand jury decided not to indict the Ramseys. However, their reasons for this decision remain sealed to this day.
It's a decision that leaves us with more questions than answers. What does it mean when a grand jury decides not to indict? Does it automatically equate to innocence?
Not necessarily. A grand jury's decision not to indict simply means they didn't believe there was sufficient evidence to meet the legal threshold for a formal charge. It doesn't mean they found the suspects innocent, just that they couldn't proceed with an indictment based on the evidence presented to them.
So the Ramseys were cleared by the grand jury, but remained under a cloud of suspicion in the public eye. A strange kind of legal and emotional limbo.
Exactly. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive into the JonBenét Ramsey case. We'll explore the theories, the evidence that continues to be debated, and the enduring legacy of this unsolved mystery. Welcome back. As we delve further into the JonBenét Ramsey case, we enter a realm where hard evidence intersects with speculation and public perception. Even 25 years later, this case continues to generate headlines and fuel countless theories. It's a testament to the enduring power of mystery and our inherent need to make sense of the senseless.
You're right, there's something about this case that just grabs hold of you and doesn't let go. It's like a puzzle where you think you're about to find the missing piece, but then, another layer of complexity emerges.
That's a great analogy, and one of those layers is the impact of the media on this case. From the very beginning, the JonBenét Ramsey case has been a media sensation. Every detail, every theory, every twist and turn has been analyzed, debated, and often sensationalized.
It's almost as if the media frenzy surrounding the case became part of the story itself.
It absolutely did. And that kind of intense media scrutiny can have both positive and negative consequences. On one hand, it keeps the case in the public eye, which can lead to new tips, new leads, and potentially even new evidence.
But on the other hand,
it can create an environment where rumors and speculation run rampant, where facts become blurred, and where potential witnesses might be hesitant to come forward for fear of being caught in the media storm.
so how do we separate fact from fiction in a case that's been so heavily influenced by public opinion and media narratives? What should we focus on to try and understand what really happened?
One way is to examine the evidence through a more scientific lens. Let's go back to the DNA evidence, for example. We know that technology has advanced significantly since 1996. What are the possibilities now in terms of what we can learn from that DNA sample found on JonBenét's clothing?
That's a good point. Didn't you mention something earlier about touch DNA and familial DNA searching? Can you explain what those techniques are and how they might be applied to this case?
Absolutely. Touch DNA analysis allows investigators to extract DNA profiles from even the smallest traces of skin cells left behind when someone touches an object. It's incredibly sensitive and can be used to identify individuals, even when there's no visible biological material like blood or saliva.
So in theory, touch DNA analysis could help identify the source of that unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing, even after all these years.
Exactly. And then there's familial DNA searching. This technique involves comparing DNA profiles to see if there's a partial match, which would indicate a familial relationship.
So if investigators could find a partial match between the unknown DNA and someone in a DNA database, they could potentially narrow down their search to that person's relative.
That's the idea. It's a powerful tool that's been used to solve cold cases where traditional DNA matching wasn't possible.
It makes you wonder if these advancements in DNA technology might finally hold the key to unlocking the JonBenét Ramsey case.
It's certainly a possibility. And there's another potential avenue for new information: the sealed grand jury records. Those records contain the evidence presented to the grand jury, the testimony of witnesses, and the grand jury's reasoning for their decision not to indict the Ramseys.
Could those records offer new insights into the case, maybe even reveal details that were never made public?
They absolutely could. However, getting those records unsealed is a long shot. It would require a legal challenge, arguing that the public interest in knowing the truth outweighs the need for secrecy in grand jury proceedings. It's a difficult battle, but some advocates and journalists are still fighting for it.
So while the possibility of new information emerging is encouraging, we also have to confront the reality that some questions might remain unanswered.
That's right. But even if we never have a definitive answer about who killed JonBenét, we can still learn from this case. It forces us to examine our assumptions about family, about innocence, and about the complexities of human behavior.
It reminds us that the truth can be elusive, and that sometimes the search for answers is as important as the answers themselves. But we can't ignore the human element here. We're talking about a 6-year-old girl whose life was tragically cut short. There's a family, a community, and a nation that still grieves her loss and seeks justice.
You've hit on something crucial: the human impact of this case. Beyond the forensic details and legal complexities, there's the profound emotional toll that a crime like this takes on everyone involved.
It's a reminder that behind every unsolved mystery, behind every headline, there are real people whose lives have been forever altered.
And that's something we should never forget.
So where do we go from here? What are the key takeaways, the things we should be thinking about as we continue to explore this case?
I think the most important takeaway is that the JonBenét Ramsey case is a reminder that even in the age of advanced technology and forensic science, some mysteries endure. We may never have all the answers, but the pursuit of truth, the commitment to justice, and the empathy we extend to the victims and their families are what truly matter.
Well said. As we move into the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore the enduring legacy of the JonBenét Ramsey case and what it tells us about ourselves, our society, and our fascination with unsolved mysteries.
Welcome back. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive: the timeline, the evidence, the suspects, the theories. It's a case that's both fascinating and incredibly sad.
Yeah. What are your thoughts as we reach the end of our exploration, I guess?
It's a case that stays with you. Even after you've examined all the details, it raises so many questions about human nature, about the dark secrets that families can keep, and about our relentless pursuit of justice, even when it seems impossible to attain.
You mentioned earlier that this case might teach us something about ourselves. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think the JonBenét Ramsey case reflects our collective anxieties about the safety and vulnerability of children. It taps into our deepest fears about the world being an unpredictable and sometimes dangerous place, even for those who seem to have it all.
It's a case that shatters the illusion of safety and reminds us that even in seemingly idyllic environments, darkness can lurk beneath the surface.
Exactly. And it also speaks to our fascination with true crime, right?
Yeah.
Why are we so drawn to these stories of tragedy, mystery, and the darker aspects of human behavior?
That's a question that I've often asked myself. Is it a morbid curiosity, a desire to understand the motivations behind such horrific acts? Or maybe it's a way to confront our own fears and anxieties in a safe, controlled environment.
It could be all of those things. True crime allows us to explore the boundaries of human behavior, to grapple with ethical dilemmas, and to try to make sense of the senseless.
Yeah, it's like a psychological puzzle that we're compelled to solve, even though the pieces might never fully fit together.
And perhaps that's the point. Maybe the most important lesson we can take from the JonBenét Ramsey case is that some mysteries are meant to endure. That sometimes The search for answers is more important than the answers themselves.
It's a humbling thought for sure. So after all we've discussed, what do you think is the most enduring legacy of this case?
Well, I believe the JonBenét Ramsey case has had a lasting impact on the way we think about child safety and the role of media in high-profile criminal investigations. It's also a stark reminder that even with advancements in forensic technology, some cases remain unsolved, leaving behind a trail of questions, theories, and a profound sense of unfinished business.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we're left with a sense of awe at the complexity of this case and a renewed appreciation for the dedication of those who continue to search for answers. It's a story that will likely continue to fascinate and haunt us for years to come.
And hopefully it will also continue to inspire us to seek justice, to question our assumptions, and to never forget the victims of these tragic crimes.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries of our time. If this case has sparked your interest, we encourage you to continue your own exploration. Read the books, watch the documentaries, and form your own conclusions. And if you have any thoughts or theories you'd like to share, feel free to connect with us on our social media channels. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep searching for the truth.